A Sorcerer Gish? You may have seen the title of the video this week and thought, no way this can work without some homebrew or third-party content. Well, my friend, I'm here to tell you that with the right build, it can work, and you might be as surprised as I was to discover just how well it can work. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, every week I take a deep dive into a character build for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just really enjoy theorycrafting, or you're just looking for some tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name's Colby. Right, a Sorcerer Gish. It's something I've always wanted to see in D&D. We have Bladesinger Wizards, we have Valor Bards, we even have Moon Druids and War Clerics. Any Warlock can be a spell sword with the change to Pact of the Blade for 2024, but where is the spell sword sorcerer? It just doesn't exist. Well, screw that. I've been wanting to experiment with trying to make a Gishy sorcerer for years now, and I'm tired of waiting. Kelly and Monty, the dungeon dudes, actually had me take a look at a sorcerer spell sword subclass that they have made available to their channel patrons. So go patronize the dungeon dudes if you want to take a gander. Spoiler alert, it's freaking awesome, let me tell you. But ever since that day, a month or so ago, my desire to try and build a Gishy sorcerer has just increased exponentially. And no, I'm not talking about taking 5 or 6 levels of Paladin and then going Sorcerer. I want to see how effective a character we can be by just going Sorcerer at the beginning and then staying Sorcerer for pretty much our whole career, maybe with a little dip. Can we make it work? No extra attack. I'm gonna say, yeah, I think we can. And it might end up being more effective than you'd think thanks to some nice little changes we've gotten in the 2024 rules. There's a lot to cover, so let's just jump right in here. I proudly present D&D episode number 205, The Sorcerer Spellsword. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week. I really love this one. It's like a great action shot, right? So cool. If you'd be interested in following Randall to check out the other stuff that he's done, to maybe even commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. Ooh, welcome to my bedroom. I can't tell you guys how happy I am that Helix wants to continue sponsoring my channel, because it means that several of you have purchased yourself a Helix mattress, and that means you're probably sleeping better than ever, and that is awesome. I love this mattress, for reals. This is the best mattress that I've ever owned. It's gotten rid of back pain that I used to have when I would wake up every morning. It helps me sleep cooler at night, and it is so delectably comfortable. And I'm confident that the reason I love this mattress is because it's specifically tailored for what I like and need in a mattress and how I sleep. With Helix, before you order, they have you take a sleep quiz to help you figure out your body type and sleep preferences so that you can get the perfect mattress for you. I'm a side sleeper, and I tend to prefer a softer mattress. I tend to sleep hot. So I took the test before I ordered my mattress and got matched up with this beautiful Sunset Luxe mattress with a Glaciotex cooling cover. But there are 20 unique mattresses that they offer, including the Luxe and the Ultra Premium Elite collections, the Helix Plus for big and tall builds, and even Helix Kids designed for kids. So listen up. Helix is running a special promo right now in March. You can get 25% off of everything on their site. Yeah, everything. Such a fantastic deal. But you've got to use my unique URL to get that, which I have put down in the video description and in the pinned comment as always. So please use that if you would when you check them out. Thank you. And as always, they have a 100-night sleep trial. So order one, you get more than 3 months to test it out and see if you like it. If not, send it back, get a full refund. Their mattresses have a 10-year warranty, and they even have financing options and flexible payment plans. If you decide you do want to keep it, which I feel confident that you will, but hey, prove me wrong. I dare you. So there's nothing to lose here, but so much to gain. Oh, and shipping is free in the US. It comes rolled up in a box, and it's really easy to set up, delivered right to your door. So what are you waiting for? Better sleep awaits. All right. Huge thanks to Helix. I am truly so very pleased with my mattress. Thank you for your sponsorship, and thanks for making my life better. All right, let's get back to the build. At level 1 for our starting class, I think we got to start Sorcerer, not just for character concept purposes, but because Sorcerers get Constitution saving throw proficiency, and since, like any good spellcaster, we're pretty much always going to be concentrating on something, we for sure want Constitution saving throw proficiency, if we can get it, to help us make our concentration checks, right? As for our species, I do think I would be going Elf here, and I bet you can guess why, though taking another species here would work just fine if you don't want to be an elf or accurate. Human is always great. Dwarf for extra hit points. We've got a d6 hit die after all, right? It's kind of hard to be in melee with being that squishy. Halfling's great for lucky. Have fun with it. As for our background, this is going to be one of those where I really want to take either an old background or a custom one so that I can choose my ability score increases and origin feat, because none of the feats in the 2024 Player's Handbook work perfectly here. If you can't do that, I suppose I'd probably go guide, depending on some things, but I'd be honorary about it. Because yeah, guide is the only background that gives us the origin feat that we want, Magic Initiate Druid. This would let us take a first level Druid spell that we can cast for free once per day. Go ahead and grab probably Goodberry or Healing Word, I think, and then 2 Druid cantrips, which for me would be Guidance, and then most importantly, Shillelagh. But Shillelagh here comes with a big asterisk. There are actually a couple of different ways that we can kind of build this character. One that focuses on using Shillelagh, and another that's going to focus on using Shadowblade. More on that in a second. For the purposes of this build, if we're using Shillelagh, I'm going to be assuming that it's just sort of always on when combat breaks out. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about here, a lot of tables allow this, right? Shillelagh is a cantrip. It lasts for 1 minute. It empowers a quarterstaff or a club that you're carrying so that you can use your spellcasting ability score when calculating bonuses to hit and damage, right? It also scales now, like all damage dealing cantrips, at 5, 11, and 17 to hit a little bit harder. Since it's a cantrip and requires no resource to cast other than your bonus action, many players will say, when I'm not in combat, I'm just kind of always casting Shillelagh every minute on the minute. And many DMs say fine, or maybe more DMs say fine, but when we roll initiative, you roll a d10 to see how many rounds are left on the 1 minute duration. Also, you now have disadvantage on stealth checks, and or that doesn't work if you get ambushed, or you can't use it in social situations because that's just weird, etc., right? Still other DMs maybe just say, that's obnoxious. I'm just going to let this spell last until you take a long rest, or maybe give you a magic item that lets that happen. And those DMs are my freaking heroes. I put out a poll on my channel a couple of weeks ago, and the results were not surprising to me, at least, that the majority of you would either just straight up allow it or allow it with conditions like I've kind of explained here. And I think that makes sense. That said, yeah, it would get annoying if your character truly were doing this every single minute, on the minute, 24/7, right? I get it. For that reason, I think my favorite idea that I saw a lot of in the comments for that poll, including one from Chris, Treant Monk, was something along the lines of, if they're expecting combat, I'll allow it to be cast sort of as combat begins. Some people even saying that they let it be cast as a reaction, maybe, on round 1. Bless you, DMs, for this. Seriously, if you can draw a weapon when a fight breaks out without having to spend any resources, surely you can like wave your hand at your staff that you're probably already holding and like say the magic word in the same amount of time, no? Anyways, I don't want to spend a bonus action in combat casting this, so I would 100% talk to my DM before bringing this character to their table, like you should do with every character, really. If they're not cool with assuming that Shillelagh is just kind of going to be on when combat starts, most of the time anyways, then I might just scrap Shillelagh, take a level in Warlock for Pact of the Blade at some point early on in the build, and just be done with it. Unless, and here comes another asterisk, you end up using Shadowblade, which we'll talk more about later, in which case I think for my origin feat, instead of, needing Magic Initiate Druid, I'd probably go with Alert or Lucky or Tough. Chevere? Okay, cool. Yeah, this is going to be one of those kind of videos. All right. For our starting ability scores, I assume we go point by as always and say, let's take a 15 charisma plus 2, a 13 constitution plus 1, a 14 dexterity, and then a 13 strength. Yeah, curse that strength score. We're going to need it for multi-classing, or we would have gone with a 16 con, which would have been nice, but c'est la vie. For starting equipment, we need a quarterstaff or a club if we're going the shillelagh route. I mean, probably get one anyways, early on at least, for the first few levels here. And then we will want a shield and maybe even scale mail. We can't use those yet, but we will be able to soon. At Sorcerer 1, then, we get a brand new feature that I really love, but I am a little bit annoyed with, Innate Sorcery. This says that twice per long rest, and more often later, potentially, as a bonus action, we can buff ourselves so that the spell save DC of all of our sorcerer spells increases by 1, and we have advantage on the attack rolls of sorcerer spells we cast. That is freaking awesome. I really love it, and oh, how I wish that it didn't require a bonus action to set this up. I know I whine a lot. I want everything to be free all the time, but like I look at what Wizards of the Coast did with the Vengeance and Devotion Paladins, for example, in the way that their channel divinity like self buffs can just be straight up turned on when they take an attack without spending any additional resources other than their channel divinity charge, right? And I really wish the same philosophy would have impacted more abilities in the game. So many little like self buffs that take a bonus action to turn on, like Shillelagh and this, and like with smites costing a bonus action now, and the penalty on things like Hunter's Mark, it's just ugh. It can feel like a bit of a bonus action quagmire sometimes, you know? Anyways, this is a solid feature. I love it. I will use it all the time. I'll stop whining about it now. We get sorcerer spells here as well, of course. And I love the new Sorcerer's Burst for some ranged damage that has the potential to do more damage if you keep rolling 8s for the damage die. That's very kind of sorcery feeling, right? I'd want Absorb Elements and Shield naturally for some reaction-based defense. I'd probably take Mage Armor just at this level, swapping it out later probably, right? Sleep is great for control, Silvery Barbs, of course, but above all, I want True Strike for this build. True Strike, for those who don't know, got a lot of love in 2024, saying that now you cast the cantrip as an action, making a weapon attack as you cast the spell, similar to those old favorites of mine, Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, right? Like those spells, we get some extra damage, at least once we hit level 5, though it does give us D6s instead of D8, like those old blade trips. But most importantly, with True Strike, we can use our spellcasting stat for the hit and damage instead of strength or dexterity. Hang on a minute, you might be saying. Why all the fuss about Shillelagh if we were just going to be using True Strike? We'll get to that in a minute. I mean, partly it's because I like the scaling weapon damage that Shillelagh gives us, which, by the way, we can choose to be force damage if we want, which is awesome. That's very rarely resisted, and I mean, especially since True Strike lets us have the damage be radiant instead, that just gives us some nice damage options, right? But we will have another reason for wanting Shillelagh. I'll talk about it later, so hang tight. Speaking of tight, my channel members are super tight. Gotta work on those transitions. Quick shout out to my channel members. You guys are so awesome. I love you. Thank you for your support. I could not do this without you. If you're not a channel member, I'd really appreciate it if you would consider joining. There's a button down there. It says join. Click on it and it will tell you about all the little perks you can get by being a channel member. Best of all, you can get all of them if you just join at the silver level or above. I would ask that if you sign up, that you sign up at the level you feel like you can afford and that you think it's worth. You can get access to the library of write-ups that I create for all of my builds to help you recreate them a little easier yourself. You can get access to the Discord server filled with lots of wonderful, engaging people, and even access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do, which I am doing tomorrow, and I'm excited about that. Always my favorite day of the month. So anyways, cool if you can or want to, and if you don't, that's okay. I appreciate you being here, liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing. All of those things are also great ways to support the channel, so thanks. At level 2, I want to take a teeny tiny pally dip for a few good reasons. First of all, we get medium armor, shield, and martial weapon proficiency as a paladin 1, so we could now don that scale mail and equip that shield if we wanted, which will do wonders for our survivability. But we could also grab, say, a great sword or a maul or a great axe if we wanted to drop the shield and get a little extra damage out of our True Strike, especially if we weren't going the Shillelagh route, right? Story-wise, why is your sorcerer taking a level in paladin here? I don't think it's too much of a stretch. Our sorcerer isn't just a regular old robe-wearing, stand in the back and fling spells caster, right? They have been intent on mixing it up in melee from the get-go. So my backstory and personality would for sure reflect this right from the beginning. Maybe I simply belong to an arcane order that combines spellcraft with martial prowess, and as a budding acolyte of that order, first I had to master the arcane before I was instructed in the proper use of armaments and sort of get initiated more fully into the order that's following, whatever oath you assume that your character might be sort of most interested in. Now is that time for our character, and as a Paladin 1, we also get the really great Lay on Hands feature, which gives us 5 Lay on Hands points to spend per day as a bonus action now, so that with a touch we can heal 1 hit point per point spent, or we could spend all 5 to cure poison. Very nice. Now, Pallies also get weapon masteries at this level. We get 2, and I'll say that if you're going the shillelagh route, then go ahead and take like the quarterstaff, which comes with the topple weapon mastery, right? So you can knock enemies prone, that's always handy. And then the club, which you can also use shillelagh on, which has the slow mastery so that you can slow an enemy by 10 feet when you hit them. Potentially useful, especially if you're building for it, like last week's Cool Whip build. Man, that was a fun one. Anyways, if you're not going shillelagh, then sure, take whatever weapon you want here. Battle axe and trident give topple, flail and longsword and morningstar and warpick can sap, or dump that shield and get great axe to cleave. I don't know. Have fun with it. And we also get paladin spells now right at Paladin 1. So I would probably grab Bless for a great D4 buff to attacks and saves for your group, right? Maybe Cure Wounds for a little extra healing power. But above all, I want smites. It's really the main reason that we're here. And one nice thing about Divine Smite being changed to a spell in 2024, as much as we and I like to complain about it, is that now we can pick up the ability to smite with just 1 level of Paladin instead of 2. Now that we get Paladin spells at Paladin 1, that is. That said, there is kind of a new best smite in town, depending on the situation anyways. And I'm talking about Searing Smite, which is also available at this level, and it got some nice love in 2024, as we talked about a bit with the Night of Whispers a couple of weeks back. It no longer requires concentration, thank goodness, and the extra burning damage that the enemy takes on their turn, you hit them, they take some fire damage, and then on their turn it ticks for another, round of fire damage. It's just taken automatically, with the enemy saving to end the effect at the end of their turn. This means that we can hit an enemy with a melee weapon, like we do with True Strike, applying Searing Smite as a bonus action to do 1d6 of fire damage now and 1d6 more at the beginning of the enemy's turn, with more potentially on subsequent rounds if they were to fail their save, right? At this level, Divine Smite is more total damage unless the enemy fails their save, and it is a con save, so that's fairly likely depending on what you're fighting. But since both the initial damage and the burning damage go up by a d6 for every level that we upcast Searing Smite, before long, Searing Smite will outscale Divine Smite damage-wise every time, regardless of the saving throw, unless the enemy is immune or resistant to fire, of course. Okay, at level 3, we're going back to Sorcerer, meaning we'd be a Sorcerer 2, and that means we still get Font of Magic, yes, our sorcery points, right, which we get 1 of per Sorcerer level, and can be used to either create more spell slots, or for Meta Magic, which we get right at level 2 now. Hooray. Meta Magic is so awesome. It lets us buff our spells in a ton of different ways, and the vast majority of the Meta Magic options got buffed for 2024. Twin Spell says what? So we get to pick 2 Meta Magic options here, and as much as I'd love Careful Spell for the Sculpted Fireballs later, maybe even Extended Spell now, I think for this build I would for sure take Quicken Spell because, come on, casting a spell as a bonus action instead of an action, so good. But then I would also, I think for this build, probably be taking Subtle Spell so that I can potentially get a spell off before combat starts. Let me talk more about that in a sec, put a pin in it. Don't forget, one nice change we saw in 2024 is that half-casters, paladins and rangers, right, give half of their level rounded up now when calculating spell slots for multi-classed characters, right? So as a Sorcerer 2 Pally 1, we have the spell slots of a full full caster now, right? A level 3 caster, meaning we do have 2 second level spell slots at this level, which is great for smiting purposes, among other things. At level 4, we would be a Sorcerer 3, and that means we get our Sorcerer subclass. And I mean, sorry, not sorry, I guess I've got to go with my new favorite Sorcerer subclass here, Draconic. I love the buffs they got so much. When I first saw the changes, I immediately thought, maybe this is my entree into a Sorcerer Gish, and I've been wanting to try it out ever since, so here we are. I promise I'll get to wild magic eventually, I swear. But at this level, Draconic Sorcerers get Draconic Resilience, which says that not only do we gain 1 more hit point per Sorcerer level, man, imagine if we would have gone like Dwarf for our species and taken the Tough feat. 4 more hit points per Sorcerer level means you'd have actually more hit points than a Barbarian. That would be awesome. But we also get not just like natural armor of 13 plus our dex mod like before. No, we basically get charisma based unarmored defense like the Dance Bard, letting our armor class be equal to 10 plus our dexterity plus our charisma. So awesome. And we're not even prohibited from using a shield. To be fair, with our current ability scores, we'd have a better armor class in half plate, right, than we would going naked. But once we get our charisma capped, that won't be the case. We'd be just the same. Okay, fine. Maybe since we took a pally dip, this feature isn't all that cool, but I still love it. We then get second level sorcerer spells, and Draconic Sorcerers actually get some free spells now. Awesome. They're Alter Self, Chromatic Orb, Command, and Dragon's Breath, all for free. Pretty great. In addition to those, I'd love to have like Blur for survivability, causing enemies to have disadvantage on attacks against you, right? Hold Person to paralyze humanoids, Mirror Image to make yourself harder to hit, Misty Step for teleporting, maybe Scorching Ray for some ranged burst damage, Web for some nice area of effect control, but the one that I would most want to grab here, of course, would be, say it with me, Shadowblade. Yeah, you knew this was coming. Okay. There are some potential caveats with this one as well, so let's just get into it. First of all, right, a few months ago I had another poll on my channel asking if at your table you could use Subtle Spell to basically cast a spell before combat broke out to keep from having to spend resources on it, like on round 1, right, to cast the spell. At the time, we were talking about Hold Person, and I made use of the tactic in the other Draconic Sorcerer build that I've done for 2024. Actually, Critty Bang Bang, best name ever. But the concept applies, I think, and most of you said in that poll, yeah, you could use Subtle Spell to cast a spell before combat broke out, since Subtle Spell lets you cast without verbal or somatic or material components now. In our case, sure, it would probably cause initiative to be rolled if you were to subtly cast Shadowblade, right, as you're basically drawing a weapon. But that's fine, just as long as I don't have to do it on round 1. And no, I don't think that's overpowered to allow this, because we're spending resources here, sorcery points, right? But yeah, there's another potential problem with Shadowblade, aside from the fact that it didn't get updated for 2024, meaning you might not be able to use it at your table, and it doesn't have weapon masteries associated with it or anything, right? But it's that while this creates a Sword of Solid Gloom in your hand that has the Finesse, Throne, and Light properties, which deals 2d8 psychic damage on a hit, more if you upcast it, and even gives you advantage on your attacks when you're in dim light or darkness, rules as written, you can't use it to True Strike, since just like when Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade got updated with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, something I still haven't recovered from 4 years later, True Strike requires you to make the attack with a weapon that costs money, and technically, Shadowblade probably doesn't cost money. I know, you all have your reasons explaining why it actually does cost money, and that's fine. I believe you. Once again, heading to the polls, we see that the vast majority of you can Booming Blade with a Shadowblade at your table. I've gone over this a billion times. If I could get it going before initiative was rolled via Subtle Spell, and if I could cast True Strike with it. And about this time, you might be typing something in the comments like, dude, you're making a lot of freaking assumptions here. To be fair, we all make a lot of assumptions when theory crafting, but I don't feel that bad about this, honestly. I try to stick to rules as written most of the time, but I also like to build for what a majority of people can do at their tables, and I feel like I'm at least sticking to that here. All of that said, if you can't or don't want to use Shadowblade in this way, it's totally fine. We'll concentrate on a different spell and stick to Shillelagh, or take that aforementioned Warlock dip. And the numbers are going to be very, very similar. I will tell you about both of them when I do damage reports. Okay? Okay, at level 5, we would be a Sorcerer 4, and that means we get a feat, and yes, I would want to take Elven Accuracy here, assuming that we went Elf, right, so that we can bump our Charisma by 1 to 18, and then roll 3 d20s whenever we make an attack with Dexterity, Wisdom, Intelligence, or Charisma, and we have advantage. It's awesome, and it's especially awesome for those of us who can smite, right? Because increased chance to crit means more big damage on that smite. Don't forget, we get 3rd level spell slots here, and also True Strike and Shillelagh get their little damage bump, right? True Strike now does an extra d6 of damage on a hit, and Shillelagh goes from a d8 of damage on the weapon to a d10 of damage for the weapon, right? Okay, at level 6, we would be a Sorcerer 5, and that means we get Sorceress Restoration, which is another new feature for 2024, and it just lets us recover half of our spent sorcery points, rounded down, after a short rest once per day. Much appreciated. And then we get 3rd level sorcerer spells, and Draconic Sorcerers get Fear and Fly for free. I mean, amazing. Both spells that I would undoubtedly want to prioritize. While, of course, you should consider Counterspell and Dispel Magic and Catnap and, Fireball, Hypnotic Pattern, and Slow, among others. The only one I want to talk about for damage purposes that we might consider here is Haste. Okay. So here's where all of the messiness of what we've built for our specific table kind of comes to a head, and you get to make a choice, right? Haste is a great spell. It increases our armor class by 2, gives us advantage on dexterity saving throws, it doubles our move speed, and then gives us an extra action every single turn, though we can only use that action to dash, disengage, hide, utilize, or take the attack action, but in that case we're limited to a single attack, right? And that's okay. We don't have extra attacks, so it wouldn't have mattered. Haste does come with a big downside in that when you lose concentration on the spell, you're essentially out of commission for a round. And that's brutal, but it's fun. I don't know. I like high risk, high reward playstyle. Right, so my preference, if I could, would be to subtly cast Shadowblade, if I could do it before combat broke out, and concentrate on that. At least that's the thing that's going to look slightly better on the spreadsheets. You might not be able to do that, or you might have a really powerful quarterstaff that you'd rather use for combat. So since we're level 6, let's kind of talk about what combat might look like for us here, depending on what weapon we're using and what spell we're concentrating on in our first damage report. Right, if you're going the Shadowblade route, on round 1, I'm assuming we'd have Shadowblade going upcast at the 3rd level to do 3d8 damage per hit right when combat started, right? I appreciate that you might get surprised sometimes or whatever, but generally I'm hoping we can make this work. If so, on round 1, we're simply using our bonus action to get innate sorcery going, then using our action to cast True Strike, hitting them with advantage thanks to innate sorcery, because we are casting a sorcerer spell, True Strike, that's making an attack, right? Hitting them with our Shadowblade and adding a d6 of damage from True Strike. One note. If you're fighting in dim light or darkness, there's no need to use innate sorcery because Shadowblade has advantage on attacks in dim light and darkness, right? Awesome. On subsequent rounds then, we would be using our action to just True Strike and then using our bonus action to cast Searing Smite if we hit for 3d6 damage on the initial hit and 3d6 at the start of the enemy's turn. At least with a 3rd level spell slot, it's 2 and 2 with a 2nd level spell slot. For ease of math, I'm just going to assume that the enemy is succeeding on their saving throw against Searing Smite every round, ending the burning effect, so we'll continue to Searing Smite every turn. Though, of course, if they fail their save, you could Divine Smite instead for slightly more total damage, right? Knowing that they're going to get another tick of burning on their turn. Also, one note, if you crit, which you will do fairly often with advantage and Elven Accuracy, you probably will want to Divine Smite since it would double the 4d8 as a 3rd level spell slot anyways to 8d8 total, for example, as opposed to critting with Searing Smite, which would double the initial 3d6 to 6d6, but wouldn't double the damage the enemy takes on their turn. So it would be like 9d6 for Searing Smite on a crit versus 8d8 with Divine Smite, which is slightly more, yeah. Now, if you can't get Shadowblade going subtly before combat begins, or if you can't True Strike with Shadowblade, or if you just don't want to use Shadowblade for whatever reason, no worries. I assume you'll have Shillelagh going when combat breaks out. You'll use your bonus action on round 1 for innate sorcery again, then use your action to cast Haste, and then make one weapon attack with your Shillelagh quarterstaff. That's granted by the Haste spell, right? And this is why it was important for us to get Shillelagh. Yeah, because making that weapon attack with it from haste is not the same thing as casting True Strike. So without Shillelagh, we have to use our strength score for that quarterstaff attack, and that sucks. Nor, it should be noted, would that weapon attack be made with advantage because we're not casting a spell, like with True Strike, and thus benefiting from innate sorcery, yeah? Similarly, then, on subsequent rounds, we're using our action to True Strike, ideally knocking the enemy prone with our quarterstaff thanks to the topple weapon mastery, making a hasted attack now with advantage if they're prone, and smiting on the first one that hits. Now, if you can't plan on having Shillelagh going when combat breaks out, and you're not using Shadowblade, then we would take a level in Warlock, probably at character level 2 or 3, I think. Pick up Pact of the Blade. Unfortunately, we wouldn't have haste yet by this level, but we would next level, and so the tactics would be very similar from that point forward. We would just, make whatever weapon we wanted our Pact weapon, and we're still able to make charisma-based attacks with it. Okay, you with me? Assuming the Shadowblade route, then, our damage averaged over a 4-round combat encounter would be against an enemy with a 10 armor class, 39 damage per round, and against a 15 AC, it would be 38 DPR. Okay, Sorcerer Gish, let's go. That is like bottom of tier 1 territory there compared to other 2024 builds that I've done to date. Not bad at all. To be fair, yes, we are burning through most of our best resources to get those levels, right? So obviously this works a lot better at tables where you're only having 1 combat encounter per day. But I guess this kind of brings up another point. The reality is that you should be using your concentration on like Fear or Hypnotic Pattern or Slow, right? That would most likely have a bigger impact on the battlefield. And the good news is that if you did, just using Shillelagh for your weapon and smiting, but maybe with like lower level spell slots, you'd still be putting down some pretty decent damage. Better at least than the Cool Whip last week, which was all about the control. So this just might be like a more damage focused version of kind of what we had going there, if you wanted to play it that way. Oh, and yes, for you Shillelagh users concentrating on haste, your damage here is almost the same. It's 37 at 10 AC and 35 at 15 AC. So like 2 or 3 points off. And I mean, frankly, if you had even just a +1 quarterstaff, you'd be on par damage-wise. So either route is a great way to go. Okay, cool. Let's see how it scales, shall we? That was a lot of info, but don't worry, it gets a lot easier from here. At level 7, then, we would be a Sorcerer 6, and I really wish we could have gotten here by that first damage report because we get Elemental Affinity as a Draconic Sorcerer. It's awesome. It lets us now just pick a damage type associated with dragons, Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Poison, and from this point on, we'll always have resistance to that damage type, thank you, and when we cast a spell that deals damage of that type, you can add your Charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. Naturally, we will be going Fire. Both because I think it's among the most common types of damage that we'll be subjected to. Poison probably beats it. Might have to double check the new monster manual to be sure of that. But also because, yeah, Searing Smite. Now we get to add 4 more damage if we're using Searing Smite. Unfortunately, it should really only be to the initial damage, not the burning damage later, since we're told we add the bonus damage when you cast a spell that deals damage, right? Not when a spell you cast deals damage. But hey, maybe you can convince your DM otherwise and get a little extra damage on the fire ticks later too. Don't forget we have 4th level spell slots now too for upcasting purposes. At level 8, we would be a Sorcerer 7, and that means we get Sorcery Incarnate, which says that if we're out of uses of innate sorcery, remember we get 2 uses per day, right? We can spend 2 sorcery points when we take a bonus action to activate it to just like use it again. Nice. Better yet, perhaps we're told that while our innate sorcery feature is active, we can use up to 2 of our metamagic options on each spell we cast. That's potentially really powerful and something I've got on my to-do list to build around. I don't imagine we'll be using it a ton on this build, and not at this level anyways, though maybe later when we get more metamagic options. We get 4th level sorcerer spells here too, and I'm gonna say something that you're gonna start hearing a lot from me, and that's pick your favorites. Draconic sorcerers get Arcane Eye and Charm Monster for free, both potentially really useful. But then, I mean, while Banishment and Dimension Door, Polymorph, Fire Shield, greater invisibility, psychic lance, wall of fire, and more are all fantastic. PYF, none of them are necessarily going to increase our damage in combat. At level 9, we would be a Sorcerer 8. That means we get another feat, and yeah, I'm going to want to bump our Charisma to 20. That's the best thing for damage anyways, and also for like our spell save DC and other sorcery things. And then, importantly, we get a 5th level spell slot now, just in time for our level 9 damage report. Right, so since last check, we have capped our Charisma, picked up some extra fire damage on our Searing Smites, and then above all increased our spell slots to 5th level. This means that we could potentially upcast Shadowblade to 4d8 damage per hit if we wanted, not saying we should, just that we could, and then Searing Smite for 8d6 a couple of times with 4th level spells, right? That's a single target fireball there. The Shillelagh users could of course use that 5th level spell slot to smite for 10d6. Remember, there's no scaling cap on Searing Smite, right? Nor on Divine Smite anymore, for that matter. One other slight buff, potentially, that we don't often mention. Anyways, assuming we're sticking with Shadowblade here, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would now do 55 damage per round, and against a 16 AC, barely less, thank you, Elven Accuracy, 54 DPR. And that's a healthy increase since last check, putting us maybe a little closer to like the middle of tier 1 compared to other builds that I've done to date at this level, so we're scaling nicely. Newsflash, spells that scale their damage are really good. Wizards of the Coast, please take note and give marshals equivalent scaling so we don't feel so compelled to be Gishes all of the time. To be fair, I love Gishes, so I don't mind so much, but I can see why people get upset, no question. For the record, the average damage of Shillelagh, again, is almost exactly the same. 1 point less total, averaged over like all enemy ACs, so yeah, get a magic quarterstaff, use Shillelagh. Let's keep going here. At level 10, we would be a Sorcerer 9. I mean, do we just stay with Sorcerer? Let's chat about it. Pause for a moment here. At some point, you might want to consider going back to Paladin. Level 2 of Pally would just get you more free first level smites and a fighting style, which isn't bad, but it doesn't do a ton for us, and it does start to like slow down our spell slot progression, right? Level 3 would get us a subclass, and that could be really cool, but like, honestly, the best thing we can do for our damage is just to keep scaling up those spell slots as quickly as possible. Of course, we'd also love the higher level spells, but for pure damage purposes, yeah, upcasting Searing Smite and Shadowblade, etc. is where we're going to see the biggest increases from this point on. With that in mind, if we were to do any more multi-classing in the pursuit of more damage, I think the class that makes the most sense would actually be Bard. Warlock spell slots don't stack with other casters' spell slots, right? Remember, so our spell slot scaling would stop with Warlock. Not that we wouldn't get other cool features there. Maybe you think it would be worth it. Sure, extra attack and piling on an Eldritch Smite at Warlock 5 would be great, but that's 5 levels away, and like we're not scaling our spells at all. Little hard for me to swallow. But with Bard, our spell slot scaling doesn't slow down, and we get some really fun utility and support, and eventually, yes, more damage on our like attack action if we were to go Whispers Bard, for example, or Valor Bard, right? I think if I hadn't just used Whispers Bard on the Night of Whispers a couple of weeks ago and Valor Bard last week, I just might go one of those two routes with the build here, honestly. But I mean, you're really gonna give up Free Flight from Draconic Sorcerer and like Mass Suggestion and Draconic Transformation, and I mean, Meteor Swarm or Wish eventually for a little more damage on your turn? At this level? Who are you and what have you done with Colby? I know it sounds a little crazy coming from me, but I just don't think I want to go that route on this build today. Alternatively, you could actually go Lore Bard even here instead, and eventually at least pick up Conjure Minor Elementals if that's allowed at your tables. And I actually originally wrote this script to go that route because I figure if you're only making one attack on a turn, like we are, right? Surely even the crazy scaling of Conjure Minor Elementals is just fine, isn't it? I think it is anyways, once a turn, but meh. CME, it's banned at a lot of tables, and I'm sick of being conflicted on whether or not I use it in my build, so let's just stick with Sorcerer, fine. More sorcery points, higher level spells, free flight, it just makes sense. Pick up a little more damage and versatility by going Bard if you want. For me, not today. So that means we would get 5th level spells here. Draconic Sorcerers get Legend Lore and Summon Dragon, very on point, but other than that, yeah, I mean, Animate Objects, not as good as it used to be, but it's still pretty good, depending on the situation. Bigby's Hand is great, Dominate Person, Hold Monster. Synaptic Static, I love. Wall of Stone is nice for control. These are all wonderful, but just go ahead and PYF here. I'm going to assume that we are upcasting our best spell slots for smites in the name of science. At level 11, we would be a Sorcerer 10, and that means we get more meta magic options. And again, I mean, pick your favorites. Things start to get really fun here because, like I said, almost every meta magic option got buffed, and now we can use 2 of them on the same spell, potentially, if we want. I think I'm almost for sure taking Careful Spell here so that I can let allies succeed on their save against any area of effect spell that I cast that they happen to be in the area of, right? Suck it, Evokers. Any spell, not just evocation spells. That's awesome. Perfectly placed fireballs and perfectly placed hypnotic patterns that we can now actually, if we wanted, quicken and sculpt, while still true striking on our turn if we wanted. So good. Other than that, I think the standout for me is probably Transmuted Spell for 2 reasons. One, we might run into an enemy who has resistance to fire damage. In that case, Transmute Spell lets us take a spell that does fire, cold, acid, lightning, thunder, poison damage, I think, and just, change the damage type to one of those other damage types, right? So now Searing Smite becomes Acid Smite or Lightning Smite. That's awesome. I mean, sure, we could just Divine Smite instead, but where's the fun in that? But 2, I like the idea of making, say, Cone of Cold or maybe Lightning Bolt if we can hit more enemies with it, or sure, like Chain Lightning, next level, right? Make them Cone of Fire or Chain Firebolt, so that we can add that little bit of extra damage that we get from Elemental Affinity. That's especially nice in like an area of effect situation, yeah, where you're hitting multiple enemies and you're adding damage to all of them. We do get a 6th level spell slot at this level, don't forget, thanks to multiclassing, and also True Strike and Shillelagh get another bump. True Strike now does 2d6 damage on a hit. Shillelagh uses a d12 for its damage. Not a huge bump, but I appreciate any scaling, even if it's rather small. At level 12, we would be a Sorcerer 11. That means 6th level spells, and I mean, I guess pick your favorite, but Chain Lightning is going to be awesome, especially if we can transmute it, like I've said. Disintegrate is nice for single target damage, potentially. Fizzband's Platinum Shield would be awesome on a Draconic Sorcerer, especially, I think, just for thematic reasons. If you really wanted to increase your defenses. Globe of Invulnerability for the same reason. I think the standout, as it always is at this level when available, is Mass Suggestion for amazing concentration-free encounter-ending power, potentially. But yeah, PYF. At level 13, we would be a Sorcerer 12, meaning we get another feat. And, with our Charisma capped at this point, I'm probably focusing on like shoring up our defenses. Maybe I should have been more concerned about that earlier, but it's me we're talking about, right? So anyways, yeah. Bumping our Constitution to 16 wouldn't be bad. Grabbing Warcaster to give us advantage on concentration checks, among other benefits. Though, to be fair, we could take the extended spell Metamagic, and if we use it when we cast our concentration spell, it not only doubles the duration of that spell, but also gives us advantage on maintaining concentration for it. Not a bad idea to grab that instead of, a different Metamagic option. And yeah, for those who are worried about being able to cast spells with our hands full, we got a shield, we got a weapon. I'm not really that concerned about it anymore. With as easy as it is to draw and stow weapons on our turn now, if your DM is a stickler about having hands free for spellcasting, just stow your weapon at the end of every round using your free action, right? And then draw it when you attack with it next turn, which you can do for free when you make an attack with a weapon. Of course, this is a little more problematic if you're using Shadowblade because you can't really let go of it, right? So in that case, sure, maybe consider Warcaster sooner. Resilient Wisdom is definitely worth considering here as well for better wisdom saves. Yeah, tell me what you would take at this level in the comments if you think I missed one. Don't forget, we get a 7th level spell slot now, thanks to multiclassing once again just in time for our next damage report. Since last check, we've got a little bump to True Strike and Shillelagh, but more importantly for damage, scaled our spell slots to 7th level. Other than that, we've picked up a nice slew of defensive, control, utility, and even area of effect burst options anyways, which are great. So, assuming we're using all of our highest level spell slots for smiting and for Shadowblade here, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would do 74 damage per round on average, and against a 17 AC, it would be 73. DPR. And while that is some decent scaling since last check, it does put us more like top of tier 2 compared to other builds at this level. Not too surprising that a character only making 1 attack per turn, even with Smite, isn't quite keeping up with the heaviest hitters that tend to pile on both like damage per hit and lots of hits, yeah? I'm actually pretty impressed that we've been able to keep up as well as we have with only making 1 attack per turn. Or in the case of Shillelagh and Haste users, 2 attacks, and yeah, for the record, that version of the build is in the same place as always, basically the same or better with a magic quarterstaff. Okay. Let's see how it does coming down the home stretch. At level 14, we would be a Sorcerer 13. That means we get 7th level Sorcerer spells, and I'm just going to say PYF again here, but have to mention Draconic Transformation. It feels especially on point. Your Draconic Sorcerer should just be able to become even more dragony, right? Firestorm's potentially nice for some AoE damage. Reverse Gravity is both powerful control and hilarious, but yeah. Pick what you want. At level 15, we would be a Sorcerer 14, and that means as a Draconic Sorcerer, we get Dragon Wings. And yeah, this is one of the main reasons I figured we should stay with Sorcerer, since it lets us just sprout wings as a bonus action that last for an hour and give us a 60-foot fly speed. We can do it once per day or by spending 3 sorcery points now, and that's just kind of awesome. If you're a spellsword who wants to be in melee, not having to concentrate on fly when fighting flying enemies is huge, to say nothing of the utility. We also get an 8th level spell slot at this level, but then at level 16, we would be Sorcerer 15, and that means we get 8th level Sorcerer spells. Again, PYF, Dominate Monster to just take control of anything really. Earthquake's great. Incendiary Cloud can also can actually be really painful, persistent area of effect damage, but yeah, PYF. Finally then for us at level 17, we would be a Sorcerer 16. That means we get another feat, and I'm just going to take one of the ones that I mentioned last time, I think, right? Bump Archon, take Warcaster, or Resilient Wisdom. Don't forget though, True Strike does scale up to an extra 3d6 of damage when we hit with it, and Shillelagh is a 2d6 weapon now. It's a great sword in one hand. And also we get a 9th level spell slot. So for our final damage report, since last check, we've seen another bump to True Strike and Shillelagh, scaled our spell slots up to 9th level, though note that Shadowblade damage doesn't scale past a 7th level spell for some reason. And again, we've picked up lots of nice utility, control, defense, and area of effect damage potential. Okay, against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 94 damage per round, so close to that century mark. And against an 18 AC, it would be 91. DPR. And yes, though we've scaled, it's been at a slightly slower pace than most of those harder hitters, putting us again at like top of tier 2 by comparison at this level, with the Shillelagh build being in a similar place as always, about on par with a magic weapon. And at this level, I mean, surely you've got like a Flame Tongue Quarterstaff or better, right? So let's get into some final thoughts here. I kind of have a lot of things to say. The tier score for this character, if you were to average the damage that they do against every armor class that we calculated for at each of the 4 damage reports and into just one big number, we end up with a 60, which puts us near the bottom of tier 1, even with those later levels dragging us down just a little bit. That's amazing. If you would have told me when I was first starting this build that it was going to end up in tier 1 damage-wise, I honestly would not have believed you. I thought we'd get like an A for effort, but that was about it, right? No Bladesinger or Bard extra attack. I mean, no extra attack period, right? No way this is going to compete. But it turns out that True Strike with a little extra damage and some scaling and advantage, plus really hard-hitting scaling smites, does some work, even with just 1 or 2 attacks per turn. And I love that. You know what was kind of one of the bigger takeaways for me from this build, actually? The fact that as much as I complain about smites costing our bonus action now, on a full caster, Searing Smite scales by 2d6 every 2 character levels, and that's assuming that the enemy makes their save. That's twice as fast as Rogue's sneak attack. Now, I know, it costs a spell slot. It costs a bonus action, but still, sneak attack should scale better. It really should. Anyways, let's talk about the downsides and kind of the concerns with the build, right? Yes, I'm aware we're blowing through all of our best resources in a single fight to get to these levels. And depending on your table or your combat day, that might not be sustainable. And sure, I make some assumptions about what you can like start combat with, right? Without these assumptions, the build takes a long time to ramp up, and the average damage is going to look worse as a result. Again though, with a single level dip into Warlock, or maybe by spending a feat on the Eldritch Adept feat if you can use it, most of those problems just kind of go away. And you could even use a big 2-handed weapon in that case to attack if you really wanted, forgoing some defense. Does this build hit as hard as a Valor Bard or a Bladesinger? Not quite. But man, there competing. And frankly, if we would have taken 5 or 6 bard levels at the end, our numbers would have looked even better in tier 3 and tier 4, right? All that said, I think the reality for this character, for most of us, if we tried to play them in game, would see us concentrating on a powerful control spell and then maybe smiting away on subsequent rounds. And frankly, I love that idea. Locking enemies down and still throwing out big kaboom attacks every turn. Your total damage wouldn't be quite as good, but you would be no slouch either, while still making massive contributions to the fight otherwise. So yeah, in the end, I think largely thanks to the changes to True Strike and Shillelagh, as well as the new innate sorcery, with a single level of Paladin, maybe one more of Warlock if need be, a Sorcerer Spellsword can not just work, but work fantastically well. And I was truly tickled to find that out. So I hope that I tickled you too. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you know how much I love you. Thank you guys so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. It means the world to me. It really does. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week. And if not, I really hope that you do not give up. Please don't give up. Hang in there. You've got this. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Cause I don't wanna lose you now. I'm looking right at the other half of me. This vacancy that's set in my heart is a space that now you hold. It's like you're my mirror, oh, my mirror staring back at me. Oh, I couldn't get any bigger, oh, with anyone else beside of me. Oh, and now it's clear as this promise that we're making 2 reflections into one. Cause it's like you're my mirror, oh, my mirror staring back at me, staring back at me. I am not the world's biggest Justin Timberlake fan, I will admit, but my wife really loves him, and I took her to see him for Valentine's, actually, a couple of weeks ago. Man, the guy puts on a show. I'll tell you what, it was a lot of fun. That song, Mirrors, is probably like the one song of his that I really like. Like, I think it's a really good song. And yeah, I'm glad that he played it for his encore. On round 1, I will. Okay. All right. Not a huge dump. Not a huge dump. What did you have for lunch? Poop jokes. Always funny. Poosh. Dog. Okay. He sees somebody in the backyard.